and welcome to The Drum. I'm Julian Morrow. Coming up tonight, why Julia Gillard is pushing her Conservative social credentials, a hypothetical tax to counteract a possible carbon tax, the speculation in the debate rages, and we talk to the former Tory Environment Minister who says Conservatives should be leading the way on climate change. A bona fide lord in the drum room tonight. Our panel this evening: the Duchess of ABC Online, Annabel Crabb, academic and writer Farid Farid, and in Canberra, political lobbyist and former Liberal advisor David Miles. First, the carbon pricing debate has changed direction to who can offer voters the best compensation deal. The Prime Minister has described the prospect of tax cuts for low and middle income earners as a live option, so she's finally playing the rule in, rule out game that she says she doesn't like to play. And she was talking up the financial positives of Labor's policy in Question Time today.
We will generously assist Australian households. We are a Labor government and we will do that fairly. We will assist businesses to make the transition and we will fund climate change programs. We believe climate change is real. The opposition is caught in denial. We want to make the big polluters pay. The opposition wants to reward them. We want to help households. The opposition wants to tax them $720 in order to subsidise polluters.
Annabel, it seems like we've got a hypothetical carbon tax coming in and now it's being counteracted with claims of tax cuts. Is this a part of a deliberate strategy from the Labor government to try and smoke out the scare campaign earlier?
Well, I think they're certainly trying to knit together the arguments about a carbon tax with the argument for further tax reform. I think that there's, there are attractive elements about that. I mean, but what you saw today actually was a kind of a sharpening of Julia Gillard's line. And what she said, she had a one line in Question Time where she said, well, the question is, Mr. Speaker, whether you want to take money from polluters and redistribute it to households, which is her, rather heroic version of exactly what her tax system is going to do, or if you want to take money from households to give it to polluters, which is her, again, rather forgivingly to herself phrased version of what the opposition wants to do. But it's kind of a bit of a neat summary that she's attempting there, and it tries to recast the role of the opposition in this debate as well.
David Miles, Tony Abbott says that he's going to roll back the carbon tax and undo any tax cuts that are associated with it. He's in a little difficult ground, though, isn't he? Because certainly when the Howard government introduced the GST, that was associated with tax cuts as well. That's a legitimate strategy for a government embarking on tax reform, isn't it?
Well, I think that the difficulty in this case with the carbon tax is that, I'm not quite sure what it's going to achieve. I mean, one of the things about the GST that you raised was that the GST was an efficient tax in that it wiped out a whole bunch of other taxes that were grossly inefficient. The wholesale sales tax just being one of them that was levied at around 7 different rates. So it was a more efficient tax to begin with. This tax, I don't even know what this tax is going to be.
Well, isn't the idea that it'll send a price signal on polluting industries so that relatively carbon low emission products will be competitively priced?
Well, the polluters, as it were, who are going to have a tax are going to pass that on to the consumers, who are then going to be compensated by the government. So it's a circular argument that I'm not sure what it actually achieves. When we've had minister after minister, and Greg Combet recently said that all of this money that's raised in the tax is going to be returned to householders and to small business to compensate them. Well, what's the point? What's the point of having a tax if you just give it back again so that people, the consumers, who are the ones you want to motivate to change their activities as to what they buy, are being compensated? So they're being given no reason whatsoever to actually change anything. The polluters aren't, because they are passing the cost directly onto their consumers anyway. And I'm just not sure what this tax can possibly achieve. And then you get into we may do tax cuts. That's opened up another fear campaign with, I think Craig Emerson was out saying, oh, Tony Abbott's going to roll these tax cuts back. We don't even know there's going to be tax cuts yet because nothing's confirmed.
I have to say I share some of David's slight confusion about it. We seem to make the transition from things that are actually going to happen to things that are so many jumps down the track that, they are properly defined as total hypotheticals. And when we talk about, rolling back taxes that we don't even know what they're going to look like yet, you do get into that hall of mirrors type situation. But David, I think, as I understand it, and like everyone else in Australia, am yet to learn the detail of exactly what this tax is going to look like. But as my understanding of it is that the compensation model is that you compensate households not on the individual items, like you don't get money back on your power bill or whatever. You actually just get extra money in order to spend it the way you like. I mean, your power bill is still more expensive, but you are kind of compensated for the equivalent of that, so you can go out and buy yourself a hybrid vehicle or some environmentally friendly thing instead. I mean, that's part of the argument of it, isn't it? That's the behavioural change part of the mechanism, as far as I understand it.
It may be, but it doesn't make any sense. When the government increased taxes on cigarettes, which has an arguable outcome in that it results in people changing their habits by reducing the amount they smoke or stopping smoking because it costs them more to smoke. They don't get a compensation package in order to still drive them towards stopping smoking. You don't say, well, we're going to increase the tax on cigarettes, but to ease the burden a little bit, cigarettes will still be more expensive, but we're going to give you a tax cut just to make general life easier. It would be crazy if anyone proposed that, and accordingly no one ever has. I don't know why it's any different on a carbon tax. We're going to tax more for carbon, but we're going to compensate you, and some people may in fact be better off. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
Farid, if I can bring you in here. Do you think it's smart of the government to try and effectively wedge the opposition on the tax side of the debate, even though, as we've all acknowledged, it's all very hypothetical at this stage?
I'm not going to get into a debate about defending the opposition here, far from it, but I think it's a morally sort of ambiguous equation that Julia Gillard is playing, because a few months ago she was playing the same idea with the mining tax, and it came out on the side of big business, i.e. big polluters as well. And the equation that David was raising about how polluters are going to pass on their expenses and their costs to citizens, it's not a clear line like that, and the comparison as well is quite invidious with cigarettes. I think how Julia Gillard is painting it is still a bit confusing, and hence the confusion today on the panel as well. But I think what this indicates is that a tax reform as part of this forum is imminent. It needs to happen sooner rather than later.
And it seems like the tax reform might happen before the tax summit about tax reform. The government has finally set a date for its national tax reform, a little later than originally promised. Treasurer Wayne Swan announced that the two-day summit of business, unions and accounting experts will start on the 4th of October, so tune your PVRs to record that one. Independent MPs Tony Windsor and Rob Oakeshott say that they're OK with the timing of the tax fest, even though both the carbon and mining taxes could be in place by then. Now, Annabel, a while ago, Julia Gillard was posturing herself as a kind of Hawke-style consensus convener of summits, and this is something that the independents wanted. Is that now basically...
We didn't get enough summits out under Kevin Rudd.
That's right,
that was a signature failing.
So basically, I mean, is the tax summit now just a little bit of business that they have to get through, but they don't want to do serious policy work on?
Well, Julian, I do have to pick you up on something there. Several times now you have referred to this as a summit when, as everybody knows, it's actually going to be a forum now. And, in fact, the Treasurer has been correcting people in the past 24 hours, ever since he first live tweeted the news of this gathering.
How did the Twitter sphere react to live news of a forum?
It didn't immediately trend, I have to say, but I'd say, well, general indifference probably at worst, mild enthusiasm at best. The Treasurer's Twitter log-on, by the way, is at Swanee DPM, so he's got that kind of...
I'm amazed that was still available.
Yeah. Anyway, look, the background to this tax summit is that it was negotiated with the independents during the great 17-day policy drought of 2010 when they were negotiating which government they were going to support. And the independents really wanted a full-scale tax summit. There was a bit of argument back then about whether the mining tax would be in it. Wayne Swan suggested that it wouldn't be, in fact insisted that it wouldn't be, and they were going to convene it before June this year. It's now going to be in October, and Wayne Swan is calling it a forum. Now, there is a difference. I think that the idea about calling it a forum is to strip it of too much significance in terms of the enforceability of any conclusions that it now reaches. I think it's now resembling a bit more of a sort of cup of tea and a round of ice vovos sort of exchange than the crucial driving part of government policy.
Yeah, David Miles, what do you make of this? I mean, is it a bit pointless to have a tax summit /fora/ casual get-together that late into the year of decision and delivery when all the big tax decisions will have been made?
Well, I think it's largely a pointless exercise anyway, and it's designed to be so, hence the terminology change from a summit to a forum. Forums don't often come out with a list of outcomes or a list of recommendations. It's just a love-in discussion. The fact that the carbon tax may or may not have been dealt with but is off the list anyway, as is the mining tax, and frankly, as is the big one, which is the GST. And any tax reform that doesn't include discussion on the GST is fanciful. You know, it's fine for the government to play with the GST when it came to health reform, although obviously that's no longer in the mix when it comes to health reform. But unless you talk about the GST in a tax forum or a tax summit, there really is no point in having the thing other than fulfilling the obligations they made to the independents in that 17 days of hell.
Farid, the independents have basically gone with this. They've said, OK, that's all right, we'll have it later. We're very busy anyway. Do you think they look like a bit of a soft touch, kind of giving away on something that was so important to them in the negotiations and now saying, well, we don't really mind when we have it anyway?
I haven't seen that vigilance that they were calling about rhetorically at the beginning of the year, and we're going to hold her accountable about every single decision, which they haven't done with foreign policy, let alone domestic policies. So again, backing down, I don't know how their electorates would feel, but again, the forum is such a pointless exercise. When it's getting policymakers, academics, and all of this could be done in the back rooms of Canberra, and we all know that. So it should be done quicker rather than later. I don't understand why it's taking so long just to come up with a date, and then after this date, what will happen? It's the same with the 2020 summit.
Well, the problem is it's just such a long time since we took a good hard look at tax, Henry.
Yeah, that's right.
So, you know, we're absolutely out to sea with fresh ideas about what to do with the tax system. But look, I will say that on the independence front, I kind of understand why they're not making such a huge fuss about it. A, they are busy. B, they're busy drafting a new tax. I mean, they're actually kind of hands-on in the formulation through the Climate Committee of the government's approach to this. So if the big issue is for this year going to be the carbon tax,
They've already got their seat at the table.
They're there, yeah.
Well, at least
Annabel makes a good point about the Henry tax review. Where's that in this? I mean, you know, they get Ken Henry to go and do a very comprehensive review of the tax system, and then, well, thanks, Ken, we're really not going to pay much attention to that, and we're going to have another little forum that only talks about a few taxes, not all of them, but thanks for your work, we're just not interested. I mean, what was the point of that review?
Well, at least it's not going to be a citizens' assembly. That's something we can all be happy about. Anyway, moving on now to social issues. In what looks like an attempt to reconnect with Middle Australia, Julia Gillard is rebranding herself as a social conservative. In an interview yesterday, she described herself as a cultural traditionalist from a family with old-fashioned values. Ms Gillard, we should probably say, well, Ms Gillard, I suppose, is nice and old-fashioned, admitted to having serious concerns about euthanasia policy, and she reaffirmed her personal stance against same-sex marriage.
I do find myself on the Conservative side in this question, and I find myself on the Conservative side because of the way our society is and how we got here. I think that there are some important things from our past that need to continue to be part of our present